Hello, we are the Association for Child and Adolescent Mental Health, or ACAM for short.
So hi everyone, I just want to say thank you for the invitation today. It's really valuable hearing Nicole speak and the input as well that's going on regarding the resiliency hubs. And just in terms of information sharing and learning about what's going on in the area is really valuable. In terms of the background to myself and where I'm from, so I'm part of quite a large educational psychology team in Manchester. It's about 36 of us. We're traditionally, I was talking earlier about traditionally the local authority educational psychology team a few years back, and since many years ago then we formed a part of the critical incident response team for the local authority, and that's going back from 1996, back in the day of the IRA bombing. There's a small local authority providers a response to schools for critical incident work. In saying that, up until the Manchester Arena bomb, there was only a very small amount of us involved, because these incidents, or critical incidents, happen from time to time, and it only requires a very small group of response. So we found that we were inundated, and it was sort of unprecedented compared to previous responses that we'd made. In saying that, traditionally there's been there were strong links developed within the educational psychology services within around the Greater Manchester area, and since the time of since the 1990s there's been the Association of Greater Manchester Authorities, and so very quickly those links were those contacts were made again, and we were able to share information and resources and sort of plan together on a way forward. We're also in touch with health colleagues, and I know that I heard the resiliency hub was running in a very quick rate of 7 weeks, and even earlier than that, there was hotlines and there was information we were given in terms of call lines that parents and families could make to seek advice very early on. So it was great in terms of the information and the connectedness around what the response needed to be. So just briefly, I'm just going to go through the work of Magma and just sort of talk a little bit about what sort of work that we are doing at the moment. I do have things written down, just so that I don't miss anything. So first of all, one of the roles we had was trying to link the children who have been treated in Manchester with the respective local authorities that they were returning back to in terms of the education services, so they could continue to provide support and a watchful eye on those children returning to school. So we linked in with the educational psychology services where those children lived. We also support schools and settings with children who were impacted, and part of the critical incident work is to enable the school system to continue functioning after a major traumatic event. As we've heard earlier, everybody becomes impacted by that, and thankfully, because these events don't happen very often, in terms of the what to do or the response is something that our school may not have faced before. What we usually find is that there's been some small event, critical incident, there's a response framework already in place. So in terms of how to inform parents, staff have to identify vulnerable individuals within schools, that format is already running, and we're just providing a consultative role. But in other circumstances we're more deeply involved, and this is more in the first 2 or 3 days. And our work is developed by the European Council for Psychologists, who provide a response to schools, and some of that work is being developed in Israel with the shellings that have taken place historically, and also in New York with the gun incidents as well. There's teams there that are already responsive to school communities on that basis, and therefore developed a lot of research and understanding about what's needed at that point in time. And also we provide briefings to schools in the days to come, and also as a vehicle to provide information, to upskill staff, and just to answer any questions that they might have. We also provided drop-ins for families, so that questions could be asked. Those sorts of approaches enabled us to identify who the key vulnerable individuals might be, who may not be accessing any support, who may not have even come into school, who may not have been seen for a couple of days. providing a means to maintain contact and to provide onward referral when it's needed. So since the attack, there's been the Department for Education has provided funding around work with schools, children and young people, mainly around, it's been used mainly around upskilling schools and staff around key areas of concerns that were identified at that early stage. And that was around critical incident support. For example, then areas around bereavement, information giving around bereavement and signposting, post-traumatic stress disorder, in terms of, what else have I got here? In terms of helping, the other thing that we did is helped staff develop auditing tools so they could identify within themselves, in their own unique school communities, what they needed for themselves, because within Manchester you'll know that communities can be very different to each other, and what resources are developed can be very different from school to school. So it's just to enable schools to identify where their area of need is, and from the training being provided, either being able to provide the whole school with that training, or being able to request a specific aspect of training from the psychology team. And when we should have said when we held these events, it was for school leaders, so head teachers, deputy head teachers and designated safeguarding leads, so they could disseminate the information. And then the other area was around community cohesion, so it was around schools understanding themes around belongingness, understanding in terms of how curriculum links can be made to develop children's understanding around critical thinking, being able to distinguish between black and white thinking and negative messages that may be coming through. We were fortunate to have some training by William, who provided us with some information around some of the themes that were going on at that time. And it also enabled us to provide some work with schools around how to support within their own communities, because I think a lot of you will remember at that time there was a spike in hate crimes. Manchester being a very diverse community and cohesive community, for that point in time there was a sense of disequilibrium at that point, so there was a lot of questions coming forward. So for example, we talked, we gave examples about how, for example, debate can be used in classes around more innocent themes like healthy eating, being able pupils to develop those skills around how to challenge stereotypes. And then also so these were pilot sessions that were run, and they're now near an end. And one of the things that we've done then is just sort of done a bit of a content analysis of the evaluations that we took, just to see what the themes were coming from that, what the needs were that schools were communicating, to just help plan the next steps. What I did is I put in, there's enough for everybody actually, if you can see a copy, but there's a grid with 4 colours on it that looks a bit like this. And it says planning, preparation, leadership and teamwork, support for leaders and practicality. And you can either do by yourselves or in pairs if you've got somebody next to you. But in terms of some of the key words or words that were coming through from feedback, I've got some of those examples. So anything that was repeated 3 or 4 times was recorded. And then if you can have a look at these 4 areas and just have a discussion about where they might belong, it just sort of give an insight into the process that we use to try and understand what the needs were being communicated by school communities. That's the one. So you've got a bigger version of this. Yeah.
Just these four blocks. So you could go
No, just in terms of where they might be.
Right. It just becomes in the content of the system. It's very well
Yeah.
Is that okay, everybody? It just some of this process can be subjective because it's about opinions and discussion and perspectives being taken. And it just ensures a consistent process that if we're sort of pooling ideas together and we're using a systematic process around that. And then on here you've got the blue bubbles, and that just helps inform then in terms of just general areas that schools were asking for, with the bigger bubbles being the greater responses. So you can see that the bulk of what was being asked for was around being responsive, having a sense of preparedness and being upskilled therefore, having the practical tools. You may have seen the mention of scripts and that sort of piece of information, policy development, and then an opportunity to share training with staff, and we forwarded that to some e-learning packages I'll mention in a moment, and also some work around supporting the supporters. So in terms of the impact from staff who are supporting other staff members, who are supporting other community members around at the time of the attack, they themselves, some of them came forward and said, it'd be beneficial for them to have supervision around some of the things that they were talking to others about. And then the smaller section was around some of the preventative work around building protective factors in schools and communities, and also upskilling students so that in terms of resiliency, in terms of knowledge and understanding, in terms of community cohesion, a sense of the sense of equilibrium could be reached, but also there's confidence around pupils being more self-aware in terms of influences around them. And then in your packs, which I should have just mentioned earlier, is an example of the school's self-evaluation form. So it just asks questions around their sense of preparedness around the policy and procedures, in terms of supporting factors available, and other factors around how informed they feel they are around having the appropriate training and resources to manage this through. So these training packages themselves have resources that accompanied them. So the idea was that once staff attended these training events, they would have the training and the resources to disseminate back in the schools, and then further on there's more further support being identified. One of the things we also did a self-evaluation. So we took staff views about knowledge and understanding before the event, before the training and after the training, and found that staff felt that they were upskilled and they were well informed. And when we've done the self-evaluations, we found that 3 months down the line, the confidence might be there, but the knowledge might be there, but the confidence might have dipped because it's out of the context of that learning environment, and then the need to apply it and that same community of learning may not be present at that point. So there was definitely a need for some ongoing support mechanism so that school leaders could dip into that. gone into that feedback from events. So in terms of the tiers around the support that we've been continuing to develop within our team at One Education. So the first, the tier 3, is supporting all those impacted with the approach of psychological first aid. So that's the theory and the methodology I mentioned earlier around the School Psychology Association. Also, this support is really targeted in the first 2 or 3 days following an event. So the idea is that after that tier, we can sort of exit the system and the schools got the information and the resources they need to continue supporting those around them. For example, they've been able to identify the vulnerable individuals and make that onward referral. There are occasions, about 4 or 5 days in, that there may be some ongoing need to maybe meet with individuals, which we did, or to provide some sort of a group support. I heard mention from 42nd Street, and I heard mention from the resiliency hubs, in that individuals who had some shared experience found it really beneficial coming together, and we found that it was quite a natural process that individuals who might have been in the same zone of proximity naturally had a need to to be together as a group, but there's a shared understanding about that experience that might have been more difficult to talk to other people about. So we supported in the establishment of some of those groups that in the schools that we went into where that need presented, and it helped provide a safe space with sort of setting up those initial forums around the basics around, for example, psychological safety, creating safe boundaries in terms of knowing around issues to do with confidentiality, respecting each other's views, all those common factors we know that enable a healthy functioning of a group. So we help support that aspect of setup, and then but always the view is as well where needs are persistent or present at an extreme level, we provided the onward referral, and the tier 1 intensive intervention is always where the referral is made to health colleagues. And then at the moment, we're working in conjunction with the University of Manchester, and the the EPSs within Manchester and around are developing 2 types of e-learning packages from the critical incident and the community cohesion work. And these will be for the school leaders then to be able to use to train up staff. And the idea is as well then, as I said earlier, because we hope that these events don't happen very often, and indeed until recently they don't. There's a resource in school that can be used at a training level that staff can dip into, can use on a regular basis. So should anything happen, there's a skill base that's been accessed relatively recently. Okay, so I think I've whizzed through that really quickly. The only other handout that you've got is what supports the school community who needs following down incident. So this is just sort of a bit of information around that we used with staff around what's needed around promoting a sense of safety, a sense of calm, and promoting self-efficacy and collective efficacy, promoting a sense of connectedness, and really importantly at a time of a critical incident, installing hope, and through that hope being able to plan a way forward. And we saw some marvellous things going on in schools. In one school, they entered the courtyard and they sang the Oasis song "Don't Look Back in Anger," and there's lots of other marvellous things going on in schools quite spontaneously. And at the time when we spoke to schools, they were talking about the critical incident, and because they were at that emergency level, they hadn't noticed all the wonderful things they were already doing. So that was part of the work that we did with them in terms of bringing forward that positiveness and helping it move forward. Any questions?
You mentioned setting up psychological first aid. What did that entail?
So one of the models is around basic PH. So it's looking at core resiliency areas, which is around beliefs, affect, cognition, imagination, and the pH is physical. And the notion being that most people have one preferred modality, but people might have a multitude. So beliefs might be religious belief, for example, or it might be belief in positive thinking. And it was informing schools about that theory and helping them in their links with staff and pupils in identifying what modalities individuals had and using them as coping mechanisms at that point in time. The other bit as well was identifying circles of vulnerability in the schools. Individuals who have experienced recent traumas would be in that circle. Individuals who are in any zone of proximity to the event would be in that zone, and people that they may not have thought about. For example, the focus might have been on the pupil body, and the staff member that might have had something really sad happened 6 months ago may not be the first person that they thought about, and through that process we're able to sort of establish who the people were we were most concerned about and might need onward referral, or who the individuals were that we might just need some close monitoring around. And then the other bit was around preparedness in terms of, the level of support a school may or may not need around how to inform the pupil body, how to inform parents, and particularly in those situations, there's a lot you don't know. So it's how to communicate that element of it while providing reassurance. So it's just touching on those elements. Thank you.
You mentioned the two kind of packs that you're developing. Where will they be available?
Because they've just ended the pilot stage, and the bit of evaluation I shared. They're currently available to the schools who attended the pilot, but eventually the idea is that they're available to all schools within the Greater Manchester area.
There is when the tsunami affected back it was 2004, hundreds of thousands of people died. There's an approach, because it's sort of an infrequent event, but it's known to happen. There's a way of challenging it by getting the kids that are or assessing them in terms of how they can embody. They see the tsunami as a sort of monster, so they can embody a sort of monster themselves that will challenge it. And what the therapist does is he looks around to see who's least able to sort of embody in a positive way that challenge to what has happened in terms of the tsunami. So they're least resilient, and they're the ones that can be targeted most effectively for treatment. And then the idea of doing that is when they're all sort of embodying this sort of ability to challenge the wave of created some destruction, they all line up hand by hand on this sort of race together and sort of push the wave back.
That sounds really powerful.
And it's very, very powerful. So I was just thinking that there would be a way to do that in bringing people back to the arena when they're sufficiently resilient to sort of, if you like, fully embody the ability to push back on what they have no control over in a similar sort of way. I've quite a nice slide that embodies it, and you can see some people that are looking towards the. There's actually an Israeli guy who learned from Guy Quinn who developed a lot of the resources in schools where they're constantly getting the shelling. And you can see how some of the kids aren't really sure what they're doing and they're sort of looking to the person, and others are fully themselves knowing what to do already. So you can quickly identify those who, if you like, in why you're least able to back back. So often what's stored in the person's body will be much more heavy than what they're aware of cognitively, because that's being embedded in the physical impact of the trauma, because it's so quickly. And as someone growing up in Northern Ireland who's experienced one, I've had that experience myself. So I sort of instinctively what comes to how it actually impacts on you. And we all have the same initial reaction, because you're bacteria and basically puts you on the ground to protect you, and you're devoid of any sort of conscious awareness of that, because we're all hardwired to react in the same way to it. But until you actually activate that information, bring it from the unconscious place where it's stored into sort of filter it, separate into conscious awareness, you can easily flood the person and not give them the effective stability and tolerance to know how to sort of avoid going back into that type of situation. But if anyone's interested in finding out more about that,
Is this something that's provided how soon after the event?
Well, that's what I was going to ask. The traditional model of a major trauma would be that within a month, a lot of the natural sort of healing will occur. Within 6 months, we'll get the majority of it. So I think anywhere between a month and 6 months. But for some people, if they don't get the right help, it's never going to get better. And it will be there, as we said earlier, years and years later. I think a very good example of that was the Aberfan disaster in the 60s, when 103 kids were killed by a mudslide. And they looked at different people who got help and people who didn't get help. And 40 years later, the people who didn't get help are still remembering it as if it had happened the day before. So trauma is sort of totally independent of time, and it's stored in the body as the experience has happened, as if it was always there. So it's very much an individual thing, and it depends on the person's own resilience and what individual traumatic events has happened to them to sort of destabilise them up to that point. So no two people will react similarly, and you just have to evaluate their own neurological responses to test them.
To be part of the advancement of child and adolescent mental health, visit www.acamh.org.